The key is in us.
Today I'm in Belgrade, where I'm meeting my Serbian colleagues at their new office. And it's exactly here that I'm going to host my next guest, Milena Djordjevic. Milena is an institution when it comes to arbitration in Serbia and in the region. I'm thrilled to see her, and I can't wait to see what she's got in store for us today. Let's go. Hi, Milena.
Hi, good
how
to
are
see you.
you? It's so great to have you here. It's so good to be here.
It's so great to have you here in Belgrade.
Well, you
again.
are from Belgrade, aren't you?
I am, yes.
So born and raised in Belgrade.
Born and raised in Belgrade, but grew up in 4 different countries without leaving Belgrade.
I think that must have been an interesting time. Is there anything you want to share about that time?
Well, yeah, it's one of the war stories. In the 90s, when I was studying, there was civil war ongoing in the region. And my years of law school education were, I guess, probably much different than it is elsewhere, even Vienna, which is, so close. So in 1996, when I started law studies, we had huge student protests against then Milosevic regime that was in power. So my first months of law school, I spent more time, I guess, on the streets than in the classroom, which did not prevent me from completing my first year in due course. But I mean, that was the reality at that time. Then when I reached third year of law school, there was a different element of political turmoil here. There was NATO bombing and all these, lockdowns of a different sort than we are witnessing today. So I remember not having electricity and still having to study for the exams and those kinds of things. But I mean, every experience, no matter how bad it is at the time, just makes you stronger. And as long as you overcome those obstacles and see them as challenges and not obstacles, I mean, there's a way to go forward.
Is it possible that that experience gives you some sort of outlook in these COVID times as well?
I mean, for all of us who have lived in the 90s in former Yugoslavia, this is just something less severe than it seems for everyone outside the region, for sure.
When you were in high school, I heard that you were participating in the Serbian national team in rowing. Is that a rumor? Is that correct?
Well, I have to say it's correct.
This is so cool.
Yeah, it was really cool. And I mean, generally speaking, I'm very much into sports. One of my favorite spare times these days is, watching my son playing basketball. But when
also for the Serbian team?
Not yet, but fingers crossed.
How old is your son?
He's 14. But when I was in high school, indeed, I mean, I always wanted to practice sports. But when I was in elementary school, I was in ballet school, playing piano and all those things that, girls of that age do. But then I thought, I should develop a career in sports. I've never done that, but, it's worth a trial. So then I thought, well, I'm tall, so maybe volleyball is a good thing. But then I went to the volleyball club and they said, well, you're too old to start. And I'm like, okay, so something else. I lived nearby the Belgrade Lake, Ada, and some of my friends from high school were practicing rowing and they said, it's pretty cool. I mean, there's a nice group of people and the sport itself is wonderful, so why don't you give it a try? And yeah, that's how I started, and it took me eventually to the national.
And you were gifted. You had a gift for rowing.
Well, I don't know whether I was gifted. I'm hardworking. I don't know whether I can say that I'm gifted for sports, but definitely, yeah, there's an effort there, there are results.
So is that the thing with you? Whatever you do, you just do 100%?
Yeah, I think that would be correct.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do?
Well, I'm a full-time academic. I teach international commercial law and arbitration law at the University of Belgrade Faculty of Law. But I also do a lot of things related to the topics of my academic research, but which are very practical in essence. So I act as arbitrator for the past 15 years, and occasionally I also take a role of counsel in arbitration, expert in arbitration, and other related assignments.
Milena, I have to say, I know you as someone who does such amazing things to build and foster the next generation of arbitration practitioners, especially from the region. Would you like to share again where you think we could do a better job to promote younger people?
Well, it's a more difficult question than it sounds at the first glance. It all kind of started with what I felt I was lacking as a student in the 90s when I was studying law here in Belgrade. But I mean, those times were different for so many reasons, including the political setting in the region. So then when I completed my law studies and my LLM studies in the States, I used the experience in the States to bring back to the law faculty in Belgrade all those things that I've witnessed can happen in the life of a law student and that were missing here. And that's how we started the Moot story. So 18 years ago, with me starting a career at the law faculty, we started the Moot at the University of Belgrade Faculty of Law. And it kind of started from there. So from the Moot, that took us to setting up the Belgrade Open pre-moot, which was aimed to, let's say, expand the knowledge to the region and not to keep it just in the capitals such as Belgrade and Zagreb at that time. Then from the pre-moot Belgrade Arbitration Conference, a huge annual event came and took place, and then it just came all naturally. I mean, definitely the younger generations got attached to the topic of arbitration thanks to all these moot-related activities.
It's still a popular subject with the students, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Students are excited about this area of law, and many of them aspire to become arbitration practitioners. And luckily, there are enough law firms in Belgrade that deal with arbitration, so their aspirations can become a reality.
When we talk about not the students, but then the actual practitioners and the people that want to take their first steps towards becoming an arbitrator, what do you do for that generation, that you involve them and give them a sort of a chance, a lift into that profession?
Well, of course, in Belgrade, like in other countries and cities, it's one thing to aspire to have a career in arbitration as a practitioner, as counsel in arbitration. It's a completely different topic to have a career as arbitrator. And there, it's my personal agenda to involve as many youngsters in the process. Because, I mean, let's be frank, we are aware what's the average age and gender of arbitrators in today's world. So there, this agenda that I have for myself, and in order to foster the young arbitrators from the region, is to involve them in the role of tribunal secretaries. So there is not a case where I'm involved as a sole arbitrator or chair that does not have an arbitral secretary, following all the transparency, of course, rules that come with it and consent of the parties. So the idea is not only to assist the tribunal, which of course is the role of the secretary, but the idea for them is to gain the experience firsthand of how the arbitration functions.
That's such a cool idea. Do you think that there is room to institutionalize that? And considering that you're with the ICC, do you see that there's a trend to push for tribunal secretaries?
Well, I definitely see a trend to push for tribunal secretaries, maybe not for the same reason that I'm advocating for it. But I'm hoping that some of my plans will also soon become a reality, including a publication of the names of the tribunal secretaries with this recent trend of publicizing the names of the arbitrators. I think there should be more transparency in that as well, for, among other reasons, giving the spotlight to those excellent young practitioners who so often act as arbitral secretaries, but apart from the parties involved in this particular dispute, nobody knows of this experience that they have had.
Do you know where the institutions stand on this? Is that something that they promote at the time?
At the moment, I'm not aware that any of the institution publishes the names of the tribunal secretaries, but I'm hoping that at least one of them is soon going to change this practice.
Milena, you said that you work as an arbitrator also. Do these appointments come from parties or institutions mostly, and how much is from work within the region?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think most of my appointments, especially nowadays, come from the parties. At the beginning of my career, I was appointed by the institution more often, I guess. But recently, luckily, that's not been the case. I mean, I have developed, I guess, a name for myself. But recently, I have been appointed by the Milan Chamber of Arbitration in a case that has nothing to do with the parties from the region or the law, Serbian law, that I've been trading.
Oh, that's interesting. Were you comfortable accepting that mandate?
Of course. I mean, it was a contract for international sale. The Italian law was applicable, which includes the CSG. I mean, you know, there are so many countries in the world that come from countries that have ratified the CSG. I don't think we think about it enough when we choose the arbitrators for any particular case.
And would you think that would be a good trend?
Definitely. I mean, I think we should pay due regard when it comes to the applicable law and the legal nature of the contract in dispute, whether it's from a country that is signatory to the CSG. So hypothetically, is there room for the CSG to apply? And then we can expand a lot the pool of potential arbitrators, because it's not going to be only, you know, Italians or lawyers coming from a similar legal tradition, but it's actually going to be the whole world. And that's one of the ways how we can achieve greater diversity in terms of nationalities of arbitrators in arbitration. Not every contract is a contract for sale, but at least a vast majority of them actually are.
Speaking of diversity, what do you think are the challenges for women in the profession?
I mean, obviously, one of the first challenges that comes into your mind is how do you combine family and business? And I guess that stands for every country in the world.
Yeah.
But then again, I believe, or I want to believe, that there's a way how you can mix successfully both your family life and business life, as long as you find the right partner. So I think the key is in us, and it does not depend on the surroundings when it comes to this particular aspect.
What's the right partner?
Somebody who supports your business. The right partner is the one who understands that you're a businesswoman and that you're not going to, you know, be home early every evening and cook dinner or lunch. That's the right partner.
You said earlier you need the perfect partner. Now tell me, did you find the perfect partner? Because apparently you must have. You're so successful and you have a kid.
I do have a perfect partner, I have to admit.
And he doesn't expect you to
And I hope he's going to watch this interview. Let's cheers to that.